Welcome to this video on how to facilitate the process mapping tool. Process is one of our 8 essentials, and our tagline is improving the speed and quality of all recurring tasks. I'd love to walk you through the tool and share some recent examples of how to use it. I'll also share a few experiences along the way. But most importantly, you'll get a chance to practice it today. I'll guide you through it, just like I do with my clients, with some coaching notes sprinkled in for you. To get us started with the concept of process mapping, when working with clients, I recommend coming prepared with a blank piece of paper, a Sharpie, and sticky notes for each participant. For now, I need you to grab a blank sheet of white paper and a Sharpie. Don't worry about the sticky notes yet, we'll use those later. Just focus on the paper and marker for now. Here's what we're going to do next. Without talking and without using any words, I want you to teach me how to make toast. You'll use only your paper and your Sharpie. No words, no talking, just drawings. Normally, I give 3 minutes for this exercise, but since it's just us two, we're going to do it in 1 minute. Ready? Let's go. All right, time's up. So how did it go? Did you manage to teach me how to make toast without using any words? I know, it's trickier than it sounds, right? Now, let me show you what typically happens when I run this exercise with my clients. Usually, I'll ask for a volunteer to come up and share their drawing. One person might walk us through something like this. First, you open the bag, take out a piece of bread, put it in the toaster, wait a little, it pops out, and you're happy. Simple, right? Another person might explain theirs like this. Bread goes in, you turn the toaster on, you wait, toast comes out. Most of the time, the drawings look very similar. They usually include the key steps, what we call nodes, for making toast. Even though I didn't give any instructions to connect the steps, people naturally start linking them together to show the flow of the process. That's exactly the mindset we're aiming for with process mapping, breaking down tasks into clear steps and understanding how they connect. And you just did that instinctively. You're already participating in systems thinking at a basic level here, and this is such a powerful way to tackle problems and bring clarity to business processes. I actually run this same toast exercise with leadership teams. I have them draw how to make toast and share their drawings, and it always gets a laugh. You can immediately spot the engineers in the room. Their drawings are super detailed, while others might only show 2 steps. It's a fun moment, but it also sets the stage for deeper work. When facilitating this with clients, this is how process mapping usually goes. After time's up for the how to make a toast exercise, say, who feels like they crushed how to make toast? Let a volunteer walk through their process. Then say, let's hear one more, who else wants to share? Alternatively, if the group is smaller or more structured, you can ask each person to walk through their process in about 30 seconds each. Once 2 or more people have shared, reflect back. I see you use lines or arrows to connect each step. That's actually the beginning of systems thinking. Even in this simple exercise, your brain started identifying the nodes and how they connect. That's exactly the mindset we're bringing into process mapping. Then move to this prompt. What did you notice that every toast-making process had in common? Let the group identify the common steps or structures. From there, transition into mapping a real business process. Now, let's shift to your work. I want you to choose a process that causes the most drama, frustration, or headaches in your team. Let the client select a process. Most commonly, it's the client journey, but let them decide. I use process mapping with my teams and teach leaders to use it as well, typically for 2 main reasons. The first is when they're stuck. They're not seeing progress on a quarterly priority or goal, or they don't know where to start. It feels overwhelming, and they need a way to break it down. Maybe they're struggling to move revenue forward despite trying everything. In those cases, we map out their sales or business development process to see where the friction is. The second reason is for clarity. Sometimes there are multiple perspectives on how a process works, and it becomes clear that people are not aligned. Some team members might not even realize certain steps are happening. That's when we map out the process to create a shared understanding and get everyone on the same page. Those are the two main ways I use process mapping with my clients. Even more powerful than drawing a process on your own is facilitating this exercise as a team. That's where the real insight comes, when you bring multiple perspectives together and map out a process collaboratively. Here's how you might structure it when working with a client or internal team. First, give this instruction. Using your Post-it notes and Sharpies, work together as a team to map out the process you have decided on the wall. Here's the important part. Do not use your notes. I want you to capture how you're actually doing it today, not the ideal version written 2 years ago. Once that's clear, guide the setup. Everyone, write out the steps on sticky notes, 1 step per note, and place them on the wall as you go. You'll have about 15-20 minutes for this. Give them a wall space or whiteboard, along with sticky notes and markers. Ask them to map out a process without using notes or pre-existing documents. The goal is to capture the present state, how they believe the journey works today, step by step. When facilitating process mapping, always start with the current state. Not what should be happening, just what's happening right now. That clarity is the foundation for improvement. You can approach this exercise in one of 2 ways, silently or collaboratively. I usually have leadership teams collaborate, especially when they're new to this. It encourages discussion and builds alignment. As they get more familiar, silent mapping can be useful for surfacing individual perspectives. For a first run, I suggest letting the team talk through it. Start with about 10 minutes to build their initial map. You can extend the time if needed. I typically use this tool for problem solving, but really any recurring process should be mapped. Waste creeps in over time, often unnoticed. Technology changes, automation becomes available, people adjust things informally, and the original process gets distorted. That's why recurring processes should be mapped and revisited regularly. If there's no obvious issue, guide the team to focus on a process that would knock the most dominoes down toward their goal. That's often business development or retention. Have the team grab sticky notes and markers, then collaborate to build a clear, concise version of the journey as they understand it. The goal is alignment and visibility. Use sticky notes so steps can be easily moved or adjusted. Break the process down into individual steps and place them on the wall for everyone to see and contribute. When teams aren't sure where to begin, I often ask, what's broken the most? Or where's the most drama coming from? About 75% of the time, the answer is business development. That's where missed opportunities and inconsistent follow-up usually show up. For example, a law firm I worked with identified their biggest issues in business development and finishing client work on time. Once we mapped those processes, the problems became much clearer. Encourage the team to throw everything into the picture. Let it be messy. You're looking for shared understanding, not perfection. Remind them to close permanent markers between notes. People always forget. And if the discussion starts slowing things down, have them write steps first, then place them on the wall. That keeps momentum going. You'll hear quick debates like, do we need a procedure for this? Or where does the CRM step fit in? Those are valuable. That's where insight lives. Just let the team roll with it. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to reflect reality. Once the activity gets going, it might get loud, and that's great. The goal is contribution and clarity. Let people add their own flavor. Fun labels or phrases that stick help with memory and buy-in later. This stage is about getting everything up on the wall. Don't edit yet, you're building raw material for refinement. When time's up, say, all right, time everyone. Let's come back to the table. Let people take a picture if they'd like. It helps to have a visual reference later. Even if it's not perfect, it represents shared understanding, and that's incredibly valuable. Before we move into takeaways and reflection questions, here's one final note. Once you understand process mapping and teach it to the leadership team, it becomes a powerful tool to hand off to managers and department leads. It's not just a one-off exercise. It builds alignment and reveals opportunities across the business. When a leader brings me a problem, I often ask them to map it out before we dive in. I want to see that they've walked through it and that they're showing the current state, even if it's messy. We're not mapping the ideal version, we want the truth. Show me the chaos. Show me the breakdowns. That's where the real insight lives. And that's what allows us to fix it together. I also wanted to share a quick tip. Last week, I ran this exercise with a client using Zoom, and we used the Bloom Growth Whiteboard feature. It's there if your client is using the Bloom Growth platform. If someone on your team is a bit more tech-savvy, they can even skip the sticky notes and map the process directly in their software. The key is just finding a way that works for the group. Zoom also has a built-in sticky note function, and it's free. So you can absolutely do this if you're working with virtual clients. Now, I want to share a few questions I usually ask after a mapping session. You'll come up with your own based on the group's experience, but here's one I always start with. Were there any takeaways or aha moments just from mapping out the process before we even discussed it? That question tends to open things up right away. For example, someone might say, "We were all trying to figure out how to even start. Do we each take a section? Do we throw everything up at once?" That struggle to get started is actually part of the learning. So I always ask next, what about the process itself? Did anything stand out when you were actually drawing it? One thing I often hear is, "I didn't realize how detailed it was," or "How granular do we get?" And that's a great realization. I always ask this first because it often triggers an aha moment, especially for the owner. You'll hear things like, "I didn't know we did all that," or "John, I didn't know you weren't doing that step anymore." That awareness alone can be game-changing. The next question I ask is, as you went through the process, did you spot anything that could be eliminated, automated, or outsourced to speed things up? That's often when people realize how much redundancy has crept in. I'll give you an example from my own company. My sales team once told me, "It's really hard to sell something here. I didn't get it. I thought it was simple. Answer the phone, write up the order, take payment, ship the product." So we mapped it out, 44 steps, just to sell one product. 5 of those steps were related to fraud checks that were no longer needed because we had since implemented a credit card processor that 100% indemnified us. But we hadn't removed those steps because we never went back to review the process. That's the kind of thing this tool is perfect for surfacing. Then I ask, where does the process bottleneck, break, or slow down? What did you notice when you were mapping it? Where did the journey feel stuck? Maybe it was business development. Maybe it was the level of granularity. Whatever it is, get it out. When teams instinctively identify the bottleneck as they're building the map, that's when the real insight starts. This is where we go deep. Once a bottleneck or gap is identified, I start asking, "Tell me more about that step. How does it work? Who's responsible for it?" Digging into those details often reveals what's actually breaking, and that's where the obstacles and opportunities come out. From there, we can ask, can we remove it? Can we fix it? And let the team problem solve together. That's where real improvements begin. One powerful insight I've seen across many teams, especially in business development, is around setting reasonable expectations for each step. For example, how fast should we respond to a new lead or client message? When you ask that, you'll hear wildly different answers from the team. 5 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, 24 hours, even a week. And that lack of alignment is often where the breakdown happens. In my other business, we created what we called the 15-minute rule. If someone reached out, the expectation was that they'd get a reply, at least a simple acknowledgement, within 15 minutes. Something like, "Got your message, we're working on it, and we'll follow up shortly." It didn't need to be an automated response. It came from a real person. And that small intentional touch made a huge difference in how clients perceived our reliability. Operational clarity like that doesn't just help your external experience, it builds trust and alignment inside your team too. Yeah, that's excellent. What you'll often find with leadership teams is that some areas of a process are a little loose. They haven't thought it through completely, or different team members are each doing it their own way. When that happens, I'll ask, who's doing it best? And once we identify that, we look at how to replicate what's working across the rest of the team. As you go deeper, especially around bottlenecks, it's important to ask, who's accountable for that step? I usually wait until after the mapping is done to ask that. Asking too early can slow them down or distract from the bigger picture. And to be honest, most of the time I either get no clear answer or I get multiple people named. That in itself is a red flag. I always say, if you don't know who owns it, your team definitely doesn't know either. Then we get into measurement. How are we going to track how well this process is working? Leadership teams are usually great at identifying outcome metrics, like sales. But what process mapping does really well is expose all the leading activities that happen before those outcomes. And many of those aren't being measured. So when a team identifies a bottleneck, I make sure we define how to measure it. We don't leave the session without at least one KPI that tracks the problem area and monitors progress as the team works to fix it. For example, let's say the company's priority is referrals. To achieve that, the client journey has to be strong. When you map that journey, you're also identifying all the leading indicators, the experiences and behaviors that build client satisfaction. That's a powerful way to teach teams how to think beyond outcomes and focus on the behaviors that create them. So yes, process mapping and KPIs go hand in hand. One surfaces the insight, the other tracks the improvement. Because when a KPI is in the red, the first thing you should add to your obstacles and opportunities O&O list is where the bottleneck is in the process. And when you're creating KPIs, here's another powerful layer to consider. Look for both a quality metric and a speed metric within each process. Think about it. Most businesses have around 5 or 6 core processes. That could include a marketing process, a sales process, maybe 2, 1 or 2 operational processes, a finance process, and an HR or people-related process. Now imagine if within each of those you identified one speed-based KPI and one quality-based KPI. That alone can provide focus, alignment, and measurable traction across the organization. When you connect your process maps directly to how you're tracking results, your KPIs stop being abstract numbers. They become actionable insights tied to real workflows, and that's when you really start to move. Here's a real-world example. I worked with a law firm last week that operates completely virtually. We ran this entire process mapping session over Zoom. As we mapped out their process, the managing partner paused and said, "I had no idea we did all this." This team was struggling to finish client work on time, and it was impacting their ability to take on new clients. That's the power of this tool. It makes the invisible visible. And once they saw it laid out, the next question was, how long does this all take? What's the reasonable expectancy? That's when the conversation shifted toward measuring and improving. So we broke it down. How long does each step take? And who's responsible for each one? Looking at the map, you could see it clearly. Some steps were marked in green, and no one was assigned to them. Nobody knew who owned those parts of the process. The real breakdown was here. The business development partner, John, had to review the work and send it to the client. But by the time it reached him, the work was only good 50% of the time, so there was a lot of rework. I asked, "Tell me more." One of the steps marked in red revealed that 100% of the submissions from one attorney had spelling and grammar errors every time. It had been happening for years. And in that moment, John said, "I can't believe I'm saying this out loud. It's so obvious now." He immediately planned to meet with Linda to get her set up with Grammarly and other tools. And that's the power of process mapping. It gives the team clarity, especially when you go deep on the steps that are slowing things down. Now, once we've walked through the process, sometimes over more than one session, I ask a final question. Is this the best way? Because there can only be one best way if we're going to measure it. If everyone's doing it differently, the metrics are meaningless. So I tell them, you'll come up with a better version eventually, and when you do, that will become the new best way. But today, is this the best way? And if the team agrees, then we all need to follow that same process. No finessing, no one-off versions, just consistency. So the how to make toast exercise, it's quick. It only takes about 3 minutes. And it's really just to get people in the right mindset before diving into process mapping. It's a fun, engaging way to warm up. When I teach it, I introduce the concept of nodes and links, each step being a node, and the arrows showing how they connect. Then I let them loose to map an actual business process. Some people use alternatives like how to brush your teeth, but the idea is the same, something simple that forces people to think in steps without overanalyzing. One of the most powerful things about this exercise, and what I always emphasize to leadership teams, is this. There's nothing more effective than getting everyone involved in the process together in the same room. Because you're not just mapping it, you're aligning, training, and optimizing all at once. And every person who touches the process becomes aware of it in real time. Instead of building a process behind the scenes and then training people later, you're doing it together, live. It's collaborative. It's fun. Grab a couple pizzas, pull your team into a room, and suddenly process mapping becomes something engaging, maybe even exciting. And yes, when I ask teams not to use their notes, I do that on purpose, even with clients. Because I want them to map how they understand the process today, not how it was written 2 or 3 years ago. That's the point. We're capturing present state. Not the ideal, not the outdated version. Just what's actually happening now. Because if it's not mapped, you don't know it. There are blind spots. And the version they're doing, whether it's the best or not, is still the process. And until it's visible, you can't improve it. What's fascinating about this exercise is what starts to surface as the team works through it. Sometimes I guide it like we've done here, as a group. But another way to approach it is to have everyone map the process individually first, before coming together. It's not uncommon to have 3 different versions of the same process show up, 3 people doing it 3 different ways without even realizing it. And in a group setting, some people won't always speak up to share that difference. But when you compare the individual maps, the misalignment becomes clear. That alone can be eye-opening. There's so much insight in that discovery. This tool works especially well inside quarterlies. For example, on Zoom yesterday, one client already had a key core process mapped prior to their session. It was on the board and integrated into their strategy. When you have the tools, pull them as you need them. If a team is in chaos or just really struggling, that's when I'll bring this tool in. You don't need to force it, you use it when it serves the team best. Sometimes I'll do a short 1-hour training inside a quarterly. Then the leadership team will take it on as a quarterly priority, mapping out the process in their department with their people. It becomes part of how they lead. Now, if it's their first time doing this, I usually let the team build the map and leave it as is for now. The focus is on visibility and alignment. Then later, once that's clear, we can do a second round. All right, now that we see the full picture, how can we optimize it? That second pass is when you really start making meaningful improvements. When we talk about finding the one best way, that doesn't mean the process is set in stone. It just means that once you've mapped it, the next step is to optimize it. If we were finishing the session today, we'd go back through the map and ask 3 key questions. What can we eliminate? What can we automate? What can we outsource? That conversation is where real improvement happens. I like to call the eliminate part strategic quitting. And when you introduce that phrase to your leadership teams, it usually lands really well. We're all taught as kids to never quit. But honestly, never quit is often bad advice. There are plenty of great second marriages, second careers, and second ideas that only happen because someone made the decision to quit the wrong thing. Strategic quitting is admirable. I've even seen leadership teams add it to their annual goals, setting a plan to strategically quit low ROI tasks or distractions that are draining time and energy. When in doubt, map it out. When something's unclear or things aren't moving, map it out. You'll be amazed how quickly patterns and answers start to surface. I did it with all my clients, and about half of them had real breakthroughs. The other half found it interesting, and even if they didn't have a huge epiphany, they still felt it was worth the time. Let me share a couple of quick breakthrough examples, just so you can get a sense of how powerful this process mapping tool can be, especially if you're speaking to a prospect or a client about it. One client I work with is a company that specializes in high-volume, tech-enabled destination weddings, 3,000 to 4,000 weddings a year. Their leads come in online, and the highest volume day for lead submissions is Sunday. They know that responding within 24 hours doubles the chance of closing a lead. But here's the issue. All those Sunday leads weren't being contacted until Monday afternoon, basically throwing money away. On top of that, salespeople were cherry-picking leads. A year ago, they installed new phone software and realized their team wasn't working very hard, but that's another story. What's important here is that the new system includes a lead routing feature. It can call through their 18 salespeople, and whoever answers first can choose to take the lead. If they don't, it moves on to the next rep. The system automatically calls the lead back within minutes of submitting the form, sometimes in as little as 2 or 3 minutes, no matter the time of day. If calling within 24 hours doubles conversion, the team expects calling within 3 minutes to do even more. Plus, these are brides actively searching for vendors on Google, so catching them before they click the next result is everything. The visionary on the team said it best. Now our salespeople can watch football on Sunday in their pajamas, and when a call comes in, they just hit yes and greet the bride. Something as simple as that could transform their ad spend, conversion rates, profitability, and even sales compensation. Here's another one. A new client of mine in Omaha mapped out their commercial roofing sales process. Right now, a rep drives 40 miles to inspect a roof with the building engineer, drives back, prepares a quote, sends it by email, and then chases the follow-up. They're flipping that model. They remembered a case study from years ago where a lawn care company used Google Earth to quote lawns. Now, this roofing company plans to do the same. Generate quotes for every tin roof within a defined region using satellite imagery, skip the drive time, and deliver quotes directly. It's a huge potential shift in efficiency. These are the types of breakthroughs that happen. And for about 75% of the teams I work with, the most requested process to map is something in business development, usually sales or marketing. The other 25% bring something operational where they feel stuck. The energy you felt putting notes on the wall? That happens every time I do this with leadership teams. And the end result? That's the key. Once the process is mapped, someone on the team always takes a quarterly priority to own and improve it. That's how it sticks. That's how it gets executed. Ideally, each leader takes a quarterly priority to map a process in their department and add it to Bloom. That means at the next quarterly, you'll already have the processes documented, ready for refinement, automation, delegation, or even strategic quitting. Now, a helpful distinction: people often get stuck thinking they need to document every tiny detail. There are different types of processes: core business processes, training manuals, compliance or SOPs. What we're focused on here are the core high-level business processes, the ones critical to outcomes. Keep it high level. Otherwise, the team may drift into documenting how to do one person's job, which becomes more of a training exercise than process mapping. When your challenge is a lack of growth or low sales, the issue is with your strategy. When the challenge is producing or retaining profit, the issue is with your execution. And when execution is the problem, the first place to look is your core processes and identify the waste. The faster you can identify and eliminate waste in your core processes, the faster you'll improve your bottom line. Core processes should be mapped at least annually. They're like closets. Clutter always creeps in. You have to take everything out, line it up, and decide what no longer serves you. A process that runs without waste or drama enables relentless repeatability. And relentless repeatability is what allows you to capture as much profit as possible. Almost every organization has at least 5 or 6 essential processes. A marketing process, a sales process, 1 or 2 operational processes, a finance process, and a people or HR process. Core processes often cross multiple departments, which is exactly what makes them tricky. Frequently, no one is clearly accountable for the process. For example, selling something might involve sales, IT, shipping, accounting, marketing, and service, so who actually owns that process? Later on, often a couple quarters down the line, we'll move into client journey mapping, which builds on this work by stitching those individual processes together and adding more nuance. But by then, half the work is already done thanks to the foundational process mapping. And here's something important to keep in mind. This isn't a one-and-done exercise. Process mapping is an ongoing discipline that continuously improves the speed and quality of everything you do. It's a critical part of running a business that's committed to getting better over time. What catches most people off guard is just how big this project really is. At first it seems simple, but they often underestimate what's involved. Access, security, versioning, all of those layers come into play as you go deeper. That's why we approach it in stages. Q1. Agree on current best practices for all recurring tasks. Document what you are currently doing. This becomes a priority at day 180. Q2. LT brings their expertise and resources. Get busy simplifying, delegating, automating, and stopping. Launch training for the entire company on these updated best practices. Q3. Determine your electronic home for updated processes. Assessing, version, security, updating, and training, and certifications. Q4, audit and continuous improvement and training process. This is a continuous improvement process in place and ongoing training forever. Goals are for people who want to succeed one time. Processes are for people who want to win repeatedly. It's a great session to facilitate. It's high energy, collaborative, and interactive. It gets people moving, engaged, and aligned. And once you've identified the best version of a process, get it into your system, especially when it comes to sales or the client journey. You want Each step mapped into your CRM pipeline so that your team is actually following it every time with every lead. For example, I have a client who does tech staff augmentation. Their sales reps were running a different process every single time. No consistency, no standard. So they chose to map their sales process. By the time they finished, they had 40 steps on the wall. I asked, what epiphanies are coming up? And the owner said, there are way too many steps. He started pointing at steps saying, why are we doing this before they even pay? Why are we putting so many barriers in front of becoming a client? And he was right. So we said, someone take this as a quarterly priority. Streamline it. Make it better. And that's the moment that turns a conversation into real traction. You'll enjoy facilitating this. Your clients will enjoy doing it. So let them try it. See what comes up. Process mapping is more than just a tool. It's a mindset. It helps uncover blind spots, build alignment, and drive real traction across the business. When facilitated well, it becomes a moment of clarity for teams, where complexity is replaced with structure and confusion gives way to confidence. So whether you're working through friction points, chasing growth, or simply seeking clarity, remember this: when in doubt, map it out. Thanks so much for being here.